Good evening, it's 5 o'clock. Let's get started with our workshop for March 28th. So we'll call this to order. Before we adopt the agenda, one thing we've done in the last two workshops is invited residents to participate at the appropriate point in the agenda. Is there anyone who would like to speak before the appropriate point in the agenda? In other words, speak now for anything? Okay, then if there is a time with our agenda that is published, we're welcome to have you come up and join us in the conversation. How about adopting the agenda? Any modifications?
For me?
Okay. I know we have a busy agenda. It's an aggressive agenda. Our aim is to start on time and end on time. Ending time is 7 o'clock, so we will do the best we can. I know we had a few items left over from last time. The first thing on the agenda is budget overview, and
I'll take it away.
I think you and Susan, or maybe Brian
Yes, ma'am.
alone will do it.
Brian.
And we're allocating 30 minutes. It may not take that long, it may take more, but let's not try to take more. And we also know that there can be time, that there could be time later in other workshops and board meetings that we'll do this, but this is a good start.
Okay, so as brand new treasurer, I really wanted to try to get a flavor for the financials. Susan and Steve have been great there. And really, when we talk about the civic corridor, we talk about the athletic field, we talk about a community center, we talk about everything else, the financials drive so many questions. So I practiced on my wife on Sunday, and she asked me a question every 15 seconds, so I'm going to go through all 3 pages before we take questions, and then I'll be happy to take as many as we need. So, can you see that all right, everybody? And there's also paper up here. What I tried to do first here was, what we've done is we've showed audited year 14, 15, 16, and 17. 17's in the process of being audited right now, and 18 budget. And I thought what would really be good for people first is to get a snapshot of where do the revenues really come from. So on line A here, association due on owners is $930 a unit for all the different owners and everything. And you can see we've had a nice run, $3.8 million up to about $4 million. So there's a steady revenue stream there. Capital revenues on resales. As part of the Civic Corridor plan, buyers pay one annual fee coming in. So you can see we had a bigger lump back there with transactions, but we've been running a nice $300,000 to $400,000 a year. The budget for this year anticipates 25 sales a month, which based on history is very reasonable. Trash service is an in and out, but it's a big item, so I put it there. And the recreation fees on apartments, as we go to more and more apartments, has been growing up to $400,000 this year, and we'll have solar coming back online and stuff like that. And then there's like other revenues at $500,000. There's just numerous little things that have onsets, offsets. But you can see we've got total revenues here going back to 2014 of $5.7 million that's just been growing nicely up to a revenue of $6 million this year. So there's a lot of money coming through here when you think about us as a unit. We're a $6 million homeowners association. Operating expenses, I just lumped them all together. There's the normal jump that goes through the town, but it's $3.8 million up to $4.4 million. It has been growing as new services have been coming on board, as we've been growing and stuff like that. But it's the normal stuff. There was nothing in there that I thought needed to be spiked out as unusual. It's the stuff that goes through the financials that you would expect. So then you come to, I created a line, we created a line which is income before reserves. And there, 1.8 million, 1.6, 1.7, 1.6, 1.6. Now it's important here that we talk a little bit about reserves versus the operating accounts. When we get audited financials from the external auditor, they actually combine the two together, and we get those two plus the service fee areas, the reserves and that stuff they have. Here we've kind of broken them out. On pages 2 and 3, I'll talk about what's in the reserves more. It's not, there's nothing funny or unusual at all. It's really like, here's the basic accounting type stuff that gets done, and then we create these reserve categories for special type stuff. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So that's just normal accounting here. But what you've done is we've had cash transfers to reserves which is this line here, we've had 600,000, we've had $1.8 million, $1.4 million. Last year we had $2.6 million, and I'll explain that in a minute. This year we have a plan of $1.6 million. So there has been strong income going to reserves. And then we got the income after. So then, if you look here at operating cash, so I show a high-level balance sheet, we had $2 million in cash in 2014, $1.9 million, 2.3, and really, when you look at this spike here of $1 million in the cash transfer, it's because the board, and I believe rightfully so, sent an extra $1 million to the reserve accounts, because the reserve accounts you have better investment options and everything to earn investment returns. So transferring those funds made a lot of sense. You know, you got other property and equipment net depreciation. The big item there is the 851 building, but it certainly includes tools and other things like that. So you got all the normal items that we have here. And you come down to just regular assets, other other liabilities, and fund equity in the neighborhood of about $3 million. So let's go to the next slide. So then we'll take you to reserves. So what I'm going to do on the next slide is kind of take you through the reserve P&L, and then I'm going to take you through how they have been broken out historically. So when you look at it here, this line up here would tie exactly to the line on the previous page that was in yellow, which was transfers to reserves. So really, reserve income is coming right out of that operating account down to here. There's small other revenues, which is really that these are setting in interest earning accounts, and interest rates have been tremendously high, as you know. So but there's a little bit of money there. Then you go into what I call replacement and contingency. We have a replacement reserves are how we take care of all the amenities here, how we take care of the pools, how we take care of the landscaping, all that type of stuff that happens with buildings as you just continue to have them in place for 10 years, 5 years, 15 years, where you have to go through. So the concept of replacement reserve is you're putting monies aside annually that are used to fix things. We had a study by an engineering firm in 2016. We're scheduled for another one in 2019. We do a study every 3 years, which adjusts it. Sometimes they'll say this is going to cost X, it costs more, it costs less, but it kind of shakes out in the big picture. So that's what we talk about here. So, you know, we spend for, and I'm going to break out the future a little bit for you here. Let's say $500,000 planned this year. We had the dog park, so I've broken out 2 or 3 big items. The dog park, $743,000 over the last 3 years, which was part of the corridor plan. The golf course property, $25,000 deposit got put down in December, and the rest of it got paid for in February, I believe. So, you know, there you had $606,000. The athletic field corridors, there's been some preliminary expenses over the last couple of years, with the big picture coming this year. When the board, the CROA board does their budget, they budget the operating account. They don't budget this account. I threw in some numbers here because what I'm going to do on the next page is really start saying, okay, how much money do we have in the reserves, and how could we do some of these projects in front of us? So here, you know, income of $1.6 million, expenses of $5.2 million, it would be a reduction of $3.6 million, and I'll show you that more in a minute. But you come to reserve fund cash, you can see it's been growing very nicely. $1.6 million, $3.1 million, $3.5 million, $5.3 million. We have been growing our reserves nicely, so no issue there at all. And what I did down here was I actually combined the operating account and I combined the reserve account. I did not include like Artisan Parks reserve account and stuff like that because that's different. But you know, you can see total cash, $3.6 million, $5 million, $5.8, $6.3 million. You can see how the combined equity of the 2 accounts has grown over that time too. So we're solid financially. When I was running, one of the questions was, do we have any money? The answer is we have money. Let's go to page 3. So then you come into the question that I think is the real question, as we get into some of these other conversation items tonight about the interlocal agreement, about the athletic fields proceeding, about a community center, and that type of stuff. So what we built here is we have a replacement reserve here, which I talked about the concept earlier, and I put restricted. We are actually, it says in the audit report it's restricted, somewhere else it says it's not. We've got the town lawyer proving it one way or not, because I believe those funds should be restricted. And by restricted, I mean, you can't be commingled with anything else. You need that, or otherwise you end up with serious problems. These funds are really I say funds that may be commingled, because you can really move these three. They're not restricted in any way. So the balances moving between the three are less important than the aggregate of them. So this $5,262,000 up here at December 31st is the amount that I had on the previous page that I said was in the reserve funds. Then I said, okay, we got the $1.6 billion coming in that we had in 2018 for the plan. I did reserve transfers of $1.1 million out of surplus. We got $1.3 million up here. And these are my artificial things for the purposes of this exhibit. I took $200,000 out of contingency to put $1.3 million there. And then I said, okay, if we want the $751,496 here in the replacement reserves ties exactly to the engineering study, and that's what we believe we need to tie for that. I said we can spend the $4.5 billion, and down here in this footnote, we've itemized what makes it up. We spent $0.6 million for the golf course land. $3.4 million was approved by the board in January, which was $2.8 million plus $500,000 in round numbers for the synthetic turf. And then I threw in $0.5 million, $500,000 for another building, bathrooms. There's fee studies and other things that are going to happen. That could equal $4.5 million. If you do that, that's how those three, okay, and on contingency. Last year with a hurricane, we spent probably between $120,000 and $150,000 when it was over with. I don't know when the next hurricane is going to happen, but it's going to happen. We all know we live in Florida. So I just threw $50,000 a year in here because I said if one hits every 3 years and it costs $150,000 and we get lucky the other two, we shouldn't kid ourselves. We're going to have hurricane expenses or something else that just happened. If we do all of this here and we spend this money the way I just laid out here, we'd have the $815,000 replacement, which ties to what it's actually a little above the engineering study. Actually, we overfunded a little, which is a positive item. We'd have $340 in capital improvements. We'd have $245 in contingency. We'd have $208 in surplus and about $1.6 million. We would be in fine shape financially. We would, this will get into the conversation when we talk about the interlocal and the community center, because we've spent it down now. You go out here, and what I did was I kept the same $1.6 million. I just kept it coming in. There's, somewhere out here, Island Village will come online, and it'll add some more monies and stuff like that to it, but we don't really know when for certain. We updated this with the engineering type stuff, which goes out to like 2032 or something like that. So we had those numbers. I didn't spend any more money here because the real point in my mind is, as we go through further conversations, is we can do everything we need to do this year, and if we're not spending county money on the community center, then we talked about this a little at the last meeting. I think we've got to wait for a period of time. You can see in 721, we're up to $3.5 million. So what I try to do here is kind of draw a story here, give you a picture where the revenues are coming through and the expenses are going, and I'll be happy to take questions from anyone. This member of the audience, raise your hand. Otherwise, board, fire away.
First of all, thank you.
Yeah.
And let me say, second of all, thank you. This is nicely done, nicely presented, very helpful. And I know it was a team effort.
Brian's awesome.
Yeah, so questions, comments?
So essentially, Brian, what you're saying is that there's 1.6 million after we've done the things that we think are on the boards right now, the 3.4 million for the athletic fields, the different pieces, and building a bathroom building, the $500,000 Danny Bumpus building, right?
Yes.
Is that right?
That is a correct statement. There's $1.6 million left because we're starting strong. This $4.5 million here, whether but one of the questions we got is the Danny Bumpus, do we build something for $500, do we build something for $250? There are emails going around about you may have some other fees. So whether this number is 4.3 or 4.6, I don't know.
Okay.
But speaking on a material basis, we can execute the strategy that was agreed to by the board in January and still be fine financially. And one thing you should know here is we will still have $1 million in the operating account. Bounce back up to page 1. Just real quick. On here, we'll still have $1 million that would, that should still be there. So we have some other cash cushion over there if we have operating emergency of $250,000 or something.
Can I just add to the $1 million CAI best practices say for your operating cash, you should have at least 3 months worth of operating cash. If you look at 300,000 a month, you're at a little under $1 million. So when Brian shows you that number, you have your CAI best practices recommended cushion of operating cash.
Yeah, or if it's $4.3 million.
Yeah.
Divided by 4. I mean, you get in there. So we've got, but if we had to dip into this by $250,000 and say we're going to refurbish it the following year, we could. These streams, the reason I wanted to show 5 years of streams, is you can see these streams are not, it's not like we had a fluky year, and oh my gosh, we've got steady streams here. So I mean, and there's no changes on the horizon that should cause those to have a problem or an issue.
So this year, we can cover bathrooms and finish the athletic fields and the bathroom. Is that with the
Concession
monies that
stand,
we
building,
have? The
whatever that would be.
Right.
Okay, now next,
What I'm saying, to answer your question again, that $4.4 million includes $3.4 million, which is what they approved in January. It includes $500,000 for extra. You'll remember when we got the things from Steve and that before, the building was out there at $500,000, but there were also some county fees and stuff like that. So that's how I built it. Steve and I talked, we talked about this yesterday, and we said, okay, some things are uncertain, and, it's got the ball field, or the land, I'm sorry. So that's out there. But we can certainly cover this year.
so that 0.5 includes the lift station and everything? Did it? I don't remember.
Well, Danny, when he stood up here, he said about $500,000 for the building, and he said that's hot in his estimate, thought that was hot. So to me, it's a simple choice. If the building's what he designed now, this big 3,000 square foot building, you're looking at about $500,000, maybe a little bit less, including the lift station. If you start narrowing that down based on size, what you're going to do with the Civic Corridor, that number goes down with it.
So projecting from this year forward, what kind of money would we be bringing in 19 and 20? What would we go? The same thing?
17 to 18, 18 to 19,
Okay.
19 to 20, 20 to 21, 21 to 22. So I'm saying that the $5.2 million goes down to $1.6 million, but then the $1.6 million goes up to 2.7, 4, 4.7, 5.5. You got movement over here. If you looked at money that we would have available to spend on really whatever we want, because remember, we're keeping the restricted funds on that over here. You got 3.3, you got 3.5. You got to have something for an emergency. I think you got to go all the way out. If we don't use county money, you're out in 2022, because you probably, if the building was going to cost $3 million, and I think I heard Jack say the last meeting that the First Baptist example building was $3 million. So if you're going to spend $3 million, you still have to have some a little surplus contingency, because you could have a storm or something. You're going to need it. So to me, that becomes the push. You're talking about either county money now, or you're talking about you got to push out. We can do what we got to do today, but then we've really spent the coffers and we got to rebuild.
So how much would we have to, I'm sorry, how much would we have to, how long would we have to wait to recover 2.5 to build it ourselves?
You'd have to go, I think you'd
What are
be
you looking at?
calendar year 2022.
No, 22.
Can I add to on that, though, you notice there's no expenditures at all after 17
Yeah.
18?
Yeah.
That means nothing else on your or your master plan, facilities master plan gets done until 2022. So the splash pads and those things that show up in there now would not be completed.
Right, right.
Okay.
Jack, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the $3 million building that Danny Bumpus showed Steve and myself was a 25,000 square foot building. It may not have all the amenities that you want in there, like a weight room, a ballet dance floor, or whatever facilities. So that building was built at $3 million, with some of completed, and they still had built out to go. I would say $4 million is probably going to be closer to what you need to do to build this building.
To do what we want.
I'm only, and that's only a guess. I don't know.
That's fair.
Jack, you may know, but was the CDD building $2 million?
I don't know what the CDE building was.
I heard it was-
It probably
One
was.
of the real questions you come up with, when I go to you, Jackson, is if you need 4
How much-
million and you got 2.5, you need an
It was
extra
2 million?
1.5 million, and then, I mean, then we're leaving.
Yeah.
2 million for the base, that's the basic
With the
structure.
road.
But no, from what I understand, it's with the road. The road and the building.
That would be worth, if we can get,
That road issue.
that would be a point of information
No,
to
no, I'm talking about
get
the
a comparison.
CDD.
Well,
and the hospitals, but-
I don't know if we can compare that, because I don't know how big the CDD building is.
Why don't we just get some information on that, for, you know, the size of the building and what the building cost? That's just point of information.
I want to go back to the 1.6 balance in December of 2018. In your view, Brian, how low can that number go before we are in a difficult spot, in a not conservative financial position? In other words, could we drain it entirely? Could we go down to $250,000? Could we? I mean, is there a number there?
So, but remember, the 1.6 here in December of 18 includes 800,000 for the replacement reserve.
Right.
I really think, in hindsight, if I had to build this again, I'd have a dark blue line right here. Because I really think you need to keep this line
Got
in
that.
place. We all know of situations in town where people didn't keep money to fix roofs and stuff
Right.
like that, and that's a disaster, and that's not what we want. So we gotta keep this line going. I mean, could you have a recession? Yes, but I mean, it just was gonna spend a little more time looking at 8 and 9, but I mean, you've got revenue streams that come here. So if you go down, if you really think about it, you got 350, you got 5, you got 600, you got 800,000 right here. So you got $800,000, which could cover an emergency. I mean, we just, 150, let's say, in Irma. I mean, so, you know, we're not gonna run out of money. Steve's comment was very correct. We're not gonna be spending a lot of money going forward, because it's we would be imprudent as a board if we didn't have contingency money going forward to cover deductibles on insurance and stuff like that. Junk happens, you know, it happens at every one of our homes, it'll happen in town. So I think at this point in time, you're pretty clean. Could you spend you know, you go into this, you're gonna get 985 and 38. I didn't go into other expenses, but if you make the decision that you wanna spend $250,000, because you need to do some action plans, and you need to do something else here and there, then what you're doing is you're pushing 2021 out into for 2022 into 2023. You end up in a situation here after this year, and I think it becomes part of the building decision when we talk about this, because if we said the county's gonna give us 2.5 and we really can't get the base in place for 2.5, then we're extremely lean. And after we've done this year, then we're lean, and we're gonna be lean for a few years without money from somewhere else while we rebuild and just take care of business. I just think that's.
Yeah, so saying what you've just said a slightly different way, we may, as a board, decide that if we did no improvements over the next 5 years, maybe we can build in 5 years alone. If we wanted to do some little things, splash pads or whatever, things along the way, maybe we just wait another year. So we have some decisions to make if we want to increase this amenity. Like last year, the board talked about park hours, park monitor hours increasing and this and that. So we, you know, if we spend something
And I
that,
think park monitor hours are already the operating budget. We got a strong operating budget.
that's fair.
This is really that extra cash outside of that goes for new items. This is when you replace the existing, this is a new item. And
Okay,
this whole thing
that's
we're
good.
doing, when you talk about the next new item, we do all this and end up really with this $800,000 here, you know, and we want something new for $250,000, we're making a either-or decision when we talk about timing.
Now, did you guys discuss when we take the fields on, if a community center happens, whatever the case is, for staffing, for insurance and liability, do we have projections on, because I mean, those 3 fields, kids getting hurt, I'm assuming our liability is going to be
I think
up for grabs.
you definitely will look at your operating expenses as we start writing the budget this year. That's going to come into play. And there's a lot of things that you can do. There may be some areas that you want to reduce level of service and add level of service for operation on that. But we have some internal thoughts on staffing and how you can have a staff presence at the park. But the cost for the operating will definitely come from those budget conversations this year. And you always have the opportunity, if you wanted to use these funds that may be commingled to help offset some of that operating. So you have all those things to consider. But one more point to David's question. If you were to adopt this plan and say, we don't want the county dollars and we want to wait until 2022, that completely changes your facilities master plan goal for this year, because it's a very simple master plan goal. It's we don't build anything over the next 4 years. And then if you want to have the conversation of do we do a splash pad here or 250,000 here or there, it's one or two items. If you want to start spending the dollars, then we need to look at updating the master plan and
trade-offs.
Yep, exactly.
That's a good discussion.
The other answer to your question is no, we did not. We have been spending the last couple of weeks really trying to build this to say what is a good, I hope it's good, big picture snapshot of where we really stand. Because to me, the other things that we've been talking about need to all be driven out of this.
Right.
And the goal here was to make sure tonight you really understand that, there's a couple, three options, and that's really it. And
I'd just like to ask whether or not, as we go forward with any spending proposal, if it could be tagged to this document to show us where it would come out and what the impact would be. This is an amazing document. I mean, for somebody who's math phobic, to be able to see this, Brian, is remarkable. I wish I'd been able to see this before the board voted last year. It would have made life a whole lot simpler for everybody to have these numbers. But as we go forward, if we make a decision, for example, about the bathrooms or whatever, I would like to see it as part of the board packet and what's given to the public to say, this will come from this column, this number, and it will change this number as follows. Does that make sense?
I told a few of you that my goal was to get it down to 2 or 3 pages, and I'm really thinking it's these 3 pages. We go to a board meeting, we say here it is at February, something like that, and are we kind of in line, and how does the cash moving and stuff like that. But I think once people see it repetitively, then somebody can look at this and say, I got it. I know how much cash there is, I know where we're going with the money we're committed to spend, and I can.
So two quick questions. One I think is for Susan. Would you call this, with all the different calculations and assumptions, conservative? Meaning this is a safe, this is a safe budget?
Okay, so as a CPA, when I think about conservative, I have pockets of conservatism all over the place. This does not have pockets. I think like when we talked about the $500,000 down here for the new building, if we did the whole big building at the $500,000 with the other fees, it's probably a little light. I have tried, because you can have accountants get too darn conservative and then they can kill projects because of over-conservatism, so I have tried to be right down the middle, and I think to get to these numbers, we'd have to make some decisions. I don't think it's materially wrong, though.
Okay, and yeah, I mean, I know you said you're not even touching Island Village here, and that will be floating in, so that'll be more income.
Island Village out here at the appropriate date, when that date is, will certainly start floating in revenues, and it's going to float in other needs from the community for X, Y, and Z.
So then the other question, again, this may be more for Susan, is with the reserve study, I know that's going to be redone in 1 year. Historically, when the reserve studies get redone, is there much change from what was there before?
It depends on the assets that we add to the community. The new reserve study will have the dog park in there, and it didn't have it before.
The fences are in there.
Oh, the fences are in there.
But I think you're along the right point there. It's the new athletic field complex is going to have 2 major assets that you're going to need to reserve for: the LED lighting and the synthetic turf field. And if you had a building, you're going to have to add reserve assets for that. And some minor assets for the natural turf field, because that's about a 10-year life cycle before you have to.
As I thought about it, and I had heard that synthetic turfs have to be replaced every 10-ish years, and you need to plan more accordingly. I, in my mind, had always thought that Island Village was going to start creating these reserves that we would end up using to maintain some of these facilities. I mean, Island Village puts us in a good place unless it doesn't happen. I mean, that risk still exists today. But if Island Village happens, you get out here at 22, 23, we're going to have a nice cash flow that will help us take care of the synthetic fields and other stuff like that.
Because you can cut your operating contribution into reserves.
Jack?
I was just going to say one thing. You mentioned apartment rec fees. probably about 2 to 3 years, some of these apartments are going to be converting to condos. So they're going to be paying a full assessment.
Full
for that
load
on
rather
top.
than apartment loads.
Yeah, and I guarantee they're going to be converting
Which goes from $300
to
to
$1,000,
close to
$900.
1,000.
And then I know you,
And
there's
then
another
we may talk
discussion on
about
what you
apartments, garage apartments and all
Yeah,
that later on
which is
too.
a separate discussion.
And along that line too, though, as you're doing your 19 operating budget, and you're looking at what it's gonna cost to operate the athletic fields, the expense for the apartment rec fees is gonna go up, because as your
Yeah.
recreation operating budget goes up, that number goes up
Well,
along
one
with
of
it.
the things you gotta look at when you look at the field is are you gonna ask people to help contribute towards them, to pay for maintenance and new people and stuff like that. I mean, I don't
So-
know that conversation's been had yet.
So we're about at the end of our time on this. Anything else, a big picture? I know we're going to keep coming back to this, and I like Jackson's point about kind of keeping this as an anchor for us.
So if Island Village comes in at 1,000 homes, you got another $1 million coming in your annual, right? About another $1 million coming in.
No.
But when they buy those homes, don't they pay an additional annual? Would there be
One-time
another
fee.
$1 million coming in?
From
When they
developer?
buy it, There'll be a one-time.
One-time
A one-time,
Even
fee.
from developer?
You'll have the one-time fee, which is, it's on that other page there, which is the work.
Once they get done, you'd have another.
Makes
Once
sense.
they got all
fee,
filled
but
out.
then you get the normal operating fees as well. But that one-time fee is going to be spread out over the time
Over
of the
the
closing
is that
period.
one
Until the
time-
phases are built out.
Is that one-time fee a resale?
It's
Does it
both.
count for the
Every
original?
time that changes property changes name, it's a sale.
Original
Okay,
sales
got it.
and resales.
And resale.
Okay.
So that, the reason why you see some of these numbers in capital improvement up over the last couple of years and
It's because
lower
of that.
this year is because Spring Lake was a huge influx of dollars there. Spring Lake's sold out now, so you won't see those anymore.
Okay.
It's easy to remember that you're going to get some new revenues, but you're also going to get into expenses. So, I mean, I would think we ought to use this as a baseline, and, you know, when somebody can swear that Island Village is coming on at this particular date, and then we've sat there and we've looked at the expense side of the house and the revenue side of the house, when we start counting those dollars. Realistically, if we do this, this is where we're going to be for a few years, and the county money have to be carefully thought about within the construction of this.
Your expenses are gonna go up, but if you think about it, you're about $800,000 for maintenance of the entire community. Additional properties at Island, and that's your biggest chunk of operating dollars. Island Village is gonna have maintenance, it's not gonna have $800,000
Right.
worth of maintenance.
Right.
And then one point that Brian made, and I don't know if everyone heard it, but you have the opportunity to charge facility fees at your new facilities to help offset expenses. So that's another source of revenue that you can look at as you move forward.
And I'd like to add, when Island Village does come on board, it's going to be an economy of scale. We're not going to have to add 30% more staff to
Right.
manage it.
Right, exactly. So wrapping this up, have a quick comment? Come to the microphone, please.
Question.
Microphone.
Oh, okay. Eileen Barr. And I the only one who's a little bit confused. I assume I'm looking at this capital improvement. This is the resale line.
Go to page one.
Yeah, I'm on page 1. That just thought from all of the discussions that have been happening over the last couple of years that people, I think, and maybe I'm wrong, always threw out a bigger figure when it came to how much would come in every year from these resales. I think the figure I had always been told was that there's about a 20% turnover in town. From this, obviously, that was a little optimistic, or I'm just a little bit surprised that as we're getting into
One of the
17.
things- One of the things I've spent a lot of time doing over the last couple of years is tying into the audited financials, looking at the reports there, and trying to build a baseline of what I believe, and that's what I had two of them look at too, is reality. So I think this is the reality. I think you just, you know, I don't know what you heard from who exactly,
Well,
but I think this is
I
probably
know what
the
it
real
is.
numbers.
I know what you're missing, Eileen. This
Okay.
is the resales. It's always been conservative at 25 a month as your base. Spring Lake is new sales on top of that, so
Right,
it's
I
higher.
see that.
But you're missing adding in apartment rec fees and the capital contribution of $310,000 a year that's going towards this also. So that's that number that you've been
Okay.
hearing, is all three of those pools of money together.
But
Okay,
those things are moved in here now, so they're.
got it.
Thank you for your question, Gary.
Gary Hudson, Spring Lake. Thank you, Brian. This is a great summary based on lots of hard facts as well as projections. So it is excellent. Because the numbers have changed, they will have to be updated. And what I want to refer to, what Steve mentioned a few minutes ago, was the 2015 Celebration Master Plan that goes out until beyond 2024. And I invite you to look at it. It's a large document, but buried in the middle of it is some charts that are similar to this. Now, the numbers are totally different because it was based on the 2014 calculations. But the idea is the same. And what I want to bring forward to you is not to ignore the 2015 master plan, because as Steve alluded to, it was adopted by the board as a blueprint to go forward for capital improvements and replacements and upkeep for several years into the future. It was put together by community surveys and town hall stakeholder meetings, so a lot of people had input to that. And then the task force put together, the board accepted that. So, before you decide not to do anything, you may want to refer to that document, because the Civic Community Center is on that document as a 2023-24 timeframe. The numbers are different, but the goal was the same. We'll get there when we get the money. But in between, there was a lot of capital improvements and replacements going on, and that's where we have extra money to do that. So my summary is not to ignore what was planned, but to do that in addition to, so that all the people who put together this plan and was looking forward to little upgrades and fixes in their little community won't be thrown out the window waiting for this to happen. So you really have to do both. The option is, as Steve said, is you'll have to modify as the board the master plan.
Right.
I reread the whole thing. I actually found it very informative.
Right.
Everything here is in there, but I can tell you the dog park was not the same cost.
None of the costs are the same.
So that's the one that we're dealing with here.
Ignore all the numbers in the document because they're all wrong.
Well, it says in the document, their best guesstimates based on that time and what other communities have built, but every community has its own uniqueness to it.
But the plan is to accomplish that because the board approved it.
Right. So that is what Jack.
Just a quick
and,
question.
Brian are working.
Could we add that master plan to this binder?
Yes.
Got it.
Done.
Jackson, I actually have an email going out to you.
I apologize for that omission.
We just got it. That was that package.
Is that what we just got?
No.
No, it isn't. That's what
You
you
did,
think.
because I had her read my copy the other day.
It's
Rachel will do
online.
that. Rachel will do that.
I think we've all read it.
Jackson, I just emailed it to you.
Was the full restoration
Everybody.
plan.
Oh, the rec.
Yeah.
Same as 2015.
I would have the whole.
One's facilities, one's recreation. That's the best way to remember them. One's about the buildings and the fields, the other one's about the
It's about 20,
activities that
25
take place.
pages.
Okay.
And it's worthwhile to have. All right, let's reach closure on this. Thank you very much.
Anything else?
Thank you very much. Good comments. Next item on the agenda, this dovetails right into the next two items. One is resolution on a community center task force, and the other was interlocal agreement with the county. About 20, 25 minutes on both of those. Discussion.
At the last workshop, I proposed and gave to the board a motion to create a community center task force. There's been some discussion about whether or not that task force is putting the cart before the horse. And I appreciate that comment, and I appreciate the time of the volunteers and the people that would contribute. I also spent time looking at the February survey, which had a lot of comments about the Civic Center or the Community Center. I would simply say this. If it is the desire of the board today to table this motion at the present time, pending a resolution of the interlocal, that I'm okay with that. I can live with that. But what I don't want to do is lose this task force, and somewhere in the middle, as we go through the interlocal, suddenly the task force just goes away and we make decisions, and then the community says, hey, wait a minute, you didn't really invite us into this. I think there are legitimate questions to be determined in the interlocal agreement. I agree with what's been said about that. But I think it should be a fundamental bedrock principle of this board that we are inviting community input more than just written comments, though those are very valuable, but there's nothing that takes the place of hearings and discussion and involvement. And if it is the view of this board that we should do that post discussion of the interlocal, then I'll withdraw the motion. But I want some assurance that that's going to happen, that there will be at some point a task force committed to do this. And if we don't have that, then I'm prepared to request a vote on the motion tonight.
Okay.
Well, I'm one of the people I'm the person who actually said I wanted to defer, but I also said in writing that I wanted to have the task force. So I don't have any problem at all committing to the task force at the appropriate time when we're moving forward with community center.
Yeah, I would echo the same thing.
David, can I also add, from a management standpoint, if the interlocal agreement is decided upon and you take the county initial upfront dollars to help with the design engineering, all this stuff, a task force would be a huge benefit to management to help us manage all these stakeholder meetings and surveys and town hall meetings, because would they be working directly with the company? And now you're getting all parties involved that will have some of the final say on what this looks like at the end. So I think the task force helping with that would really be a benefit.
Thoughts?
I agree with Steve. First off, the county has said if we decide to take their money, that $250,000 as part of the design effort would include focus groups that would be headed up by the design people. It'd be a perfect opportunity to have a task force there to help guide the conversation. I don't see a reason to have a task force without any money.
Yeah, I appreciate your bringing forward the revision in terms of timing. I also think, based on Gary's comment and knowing that we have set up as one of our goal areas, looking at the facilities master plan, that should precede, I think, and I think, you know, building on your point, your budgetary framework, I think that should precede a task force. So I would be committed, and I'm happy to put that in writing, to having a task force. I'd like to be on record to say I like the design, I like the way it gets formulated. I have a couple of caveats that I'd like to put in, but those can wait. Well, I wouldn't want to see loaded, no offense to North Village, I wouldn't want to see, just because we all like the folks in North Village, right, Jack, that it happened to be loaded with North Village people or Artisan people or Spring Lake folks. I'd like to ensure that we have distribution across the community.
If I might then offer the parliamentary procedure that would work for this, I'd like to introduce the motion, request a second. Upon that second, then I will move to table the motion indefinitely so that it remains available to us at the point that we decide to reintroduce it.
Fine with that.
So I am moving to introduce this resolution, this motion to the board.
Can I ask a question before you vote on this?
Sure.
Sarah Mummy, my question is, are you saying that the task force will be tabled and then not brought back in until the board decides yes or no on the interlocal? Or that the board will look at the interlocal and then bring the task force in before a decision is made? My feeling is that the community should get to help decide whether or not we, as a community, accept the money, not come in afterwards for a design.
So a potential answer, and this fast forwards about an hour into the workshop, is, and I think the point that you're making is community input about interlocal, maybe through a town hall meeting rather than task force, because I think the concept of task force, as I was hearing it and reading it, was really, and it goes to Jack's point of a moment ago, what do we want this facility to look like, feel like, constitute? And we've already gotten some very preliminary insights from the February survey. So I think we may end up making a decision, but on interlocal, and we'll get some discussion momentarily, but it seems to me that input from the community about interlocal would be important.
I think we still need a second on my motion.
Thank you.
Would you restate the motion again?
Sure. I move to create a community task force to make recommendations to the CROA board regarding the proposed community center.
Is it part of that to defer it until a certain point?
Yeah, I'm asking to introduce the motion first so that it can then be tabled.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, I was just saying,
And the reason
we need a second before we can discuss it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll second the motion to.
So we can,
So
and I'm
that we
assuming
move
that
on.
this is legitimate within a workshop, with a duly publicly
It
noticed
was
workshop.
a posted meeting, and it had it as an agenda item,
Okay,
so I think.
so I
it's
think
okay.
that's fine.
Okay. Now, Mr. President, I move to table the motion indefinitely.
That's,
Then I'll second.
okay.
And you have to take a
Any-
vote
any
on that
discussion?
motion, right?
I agree with her comment, though. I think
Right.
until we actually find out what the county will say about an interlocal, we're wasting our time. Once we know what the county says, I think we just ought to tell everybody, and if the town hall or something is a perfect way to do it, to get feedback. I mean, I always thought we would get feedback because it's a material decision.
Right.
You have, you have to have something to hand to the task force as far as what does the county want.
Okay.
Well, I agree completely with Brian that you've got to nail down what the interlocal agreement's going to be, know exactly where you're going to be before we offer this to the community, because the word gets out and it gets spread the wrong way. You've got 100 people in here saying no without even knowing what they're saying no about.
And you've already read the comments in the preliminary results of the survey.
Well, they're in the 2015.
Right.
They're in that document, what people are looking,
Right.
wishing for.
I think the point is that by tabling the motion here, I'm reserving the right to bring this back at the point that the community wants to have input, where there's discussion. It might be at the point before the interlocal has been decided. It might be at some point in the negotiations. I'm simply trying to keep our option open because I think that's the sense of the board, as I hear it, that we're interested in having a task force. We're just not sure when to do it.
I think that's right.
And so that's the reason.
Yes.
So I call the
Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so it's unanimous. So let's move to the interlocal agreement specifically. We had some initial discussions last week. We've allocated about 10, 15 minutes for this, at least for this phase, to see where it's going to take us.
I like what Brian wrote down in his comments. I agree with all his comments. I would like to see this page from the recreation program plan included as an appendix to this, because it refers to the order that we have. And then I think what we need to do is go through this order and see if this is okay with us.
In my career, the best way to go back with something is come back with something in writing, because
Yes.
otherwise we're going to get nowhere. So I think we need to identify 2 or 3 people and tell them to start writing.
Yeah.
Which would be our ideal counterproposal. Is that what you're saying?
Or at least one we can agree on, yeah.
Yeah.
Our ideal.
To me, if April 11th is 2 weeks ago, we ought to have something done in advance of April 11th that we can, whether we discuss it at a board meeting or what the appropriate time is, but I mean, time is moving. I think we ought to just get something written and
agree to it as a board.
And agree to it, submit it. They're not going to agree to it verbatim anyway, but at least get feedback and find out if we're light years apart. Was there an interlocal on this building, the 851 building? Or?
No. This was built.
Outright purchase.
So there's nothing here that, okay.
The only thing, we have a facility usage agreement for the K-8 facility, but it's not the same thing as the interlocal agreement.
So there's nothing that, what the genesis of my real question is there something what we could use as a baseline to steal language from?
Is there do we want to do this in writing and submit something, or should we have the county meet with us so we can sit down and talk about it? What's easier?
Or do we want to clarify what it is that we want before we sit down? In other words, just get crystal clear.
Well, to that point, this is a legal document, and CCD has already begun with their counsel to draft a document. I'm not convinced, although I could be convinced, but I'm not convinced that our CROA counsel is expert in interlocal agreements. They're expert in many things, but I don't see much in their background and history to tell me that they are negotiators of interlocal agreements. And I'm concerned that we might put together a term sheet or a negotiation sheet of the 3 or 4, 5 main items. But at some point, we will have to go to legal counsel to actually draft an interlocal. What we've got here is LegalZoom.com version of an agreement. And it's really, you know, for the amount of money we're spending and what's involved, it's really way out of proportion in terms of the lack of specificity in the work that's been done.
I know, I agree with you that the CDD lawyers are putting it together, have not talked to us, and yet we're the primary people doing all the construction and all that other stuff. Should we talk to the CDD lawyer?
Speaking of the CDD, where's that copy?
I am
that
typing an email to them right now as we speak.
Because we can't have real conversation until we have the most recent update from
Which they
the
agreed
CDD
to
that they said they would send to us.
Well, we'd rather just hire the CDD lawyer to do to interface with us.
Yeah, as long as there's no
best.
conflict between the CDD's position and CROA's position, if we waive a conflict or CDD waives, and CDD waives it, historically that would be acceptable. I don't know if there's a conflict or not, frankly. But I do know that their counsel is more conversant with these kinds of agreements than ours. And I really feel like we're operating at a deficit without that.
I agree with you, and I think it's been stated by the CDD that this is pretty much a pass-through of money through them to us.
Right.
So I don't think they have a real interest in
I don't think so either.
in the operations of this thing, so we need to get their guy on board.
David.
But we still have, well, we may not be the side, we still have our residents and what it is that we want in terms of how it's operated.
I think that's probably the only say we're really going to have in the agreement. The rest is going to be up to the CDD attorney.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the money's going through them and they're going to be the ones to sign.
Comment, you want to come up?
Debbie Todd, 905 B Street. Why don't you guys just Google it? I just did that. I used to be a paralegal. There are all kinds of templates on there for interlocal agreements, and scholarly ones at that. University of Nebraska, Texas.
Oh, sample
Pennsylvania.
agreements.
So you guys can get a lot of information.
Well,
Like in that voucher
we've got a sample
agreement.
agreement
Right.
here. What we need
That's
is
what we
the
have.
content.
We need theirs.
You know, my love of Google is unbounded, but the danger here is we're talking about liability and about a major expenditure. And so while Brian may not be conservative in his CPA-ishness, I would be very conservative from a legal standpoint and say we should not advance this without competent legal counsel. Now, are there documents on the internet that are good? Could Vaughn look at them or I could look at them as people with law degrees and say, yeah, I see some things I like or don't like? Yes, but I don't think that takes the place of competent legal counsel, and I really want counsel that can negotiate with the county here.
To clarify what I think Debbie was saying was just where we would be getting to discuss interlocal. The CDD already, I think they're on their 3rd or 4th revision of one that's active right now. And that's the one that they currently hold, that they've made some adjustments and the CDD board turned around and said, wait, just hold up, because CROA is still in the deciding passage. So we're just looking to see what CDD has come to so far.
And is that one
That's the
taking
only
the county one and a?
Oh, I agree.
I don't know what revision they're on with it, but I do know that they're probably going to have a different approach to what the county initially started with, and that's why it's important, as Jackson mentioned, it's you need that to be able to work off of what they're going to
Why are they writing this? Why?
They're the
don't we
government
get something?
agency.
They're the
They're
government
getting the
agency,
money,
right?
that's all they're doing, they're a pass-through.
It
has to be between them.
No, I understand that it has to go through CCD, but most of that is pertaining to CROA.
Right, but I think they're just, from a legal standpoint, does it make more sense for the agreement just to be between those two, and then we have another one with the CDD, or you put all 3 of them into the same interlocal agreement?
Yeah, because
That's one of the things that they're working through.
Well, they had both our signature lines on there on the original.
The county did, absolutely.
I think, my guess is that our lawyer will tell us that we're third-party beneficiaries of the contract. And therefore, in order to protect our position, we need competent counsel to confirm our liability and our rights under the agreement.
And we have to decide what it is we want for our residents.
Yeah.
And how much we're willing to give to non-residents.
Right.
That master plan 2015, all the comments, if you read, it's all in there. I mean, what the people are looking for in a community center. I think we can get a lot out of that.
And then we get that from the February survey, too.
And the February survey as well.
February survey with a lot of the written comments.
Yeah, right.
95% being anti-county money.
Right. Well, I
without
would,
full information,
Yeah.
because that wasn't put out there,
Right.
because we didn't have it.
I'd like to suggest that you appoint a group from the board to come back at the next meeting with a written set of recommendations or,
Next workshop?
yeah, next workshop for a term sheet or negotiation sheet of the key items to be discussed.
And this would be items, not what the facility includes, but it's really the terms under which we would accept county money.
Correct.
Who,
Priority.
who might be interested in being part of that?
What do you mean? What do you mean by the terms? What do you mean terms of accepting the money? You mean the conditions as to county use and public access?
Yeah.
I think the usage
I think
is
that's the
big.
most important thing, isn't it?
The usage
so we're
is
still
the
out.
one
Mine,
thing.
yeah.
That's the thing that really bubbled for most of us, I think, in looking at that draft document.
Can I just clarify for those watching at home or watching later at home, the 2 or 3 people that you select, the rest of the board will still provide input, feedback to those couple of people, right? And then you'll just compile it and bring it back.
It's a jump start. Anyone interested in participating?
You have a volunteer.
There's one volunteer. Who would like to join? Jackson?
I wouldn't mind joining, but my big thing is going to be priority. So that's going to be my core focus. Apart from that, and I think we all are on that same, is the priority for usage. Apart from that, I am fairly comfortable with the rest, but I'll work with you to just work on the priority table.
I'll volunteer. I mean, if
So
you
the
want.
3 of you? Give it a jump start?
Yeah, you've got
I mean, I have no agenda as to what it should or shouldn't be. I just want to move us off dead center and start the conversation
do it.
and then give it to the board. And again, I just want to emphasize that what we're trying to do here is to, rather than negotiate it as a body of 7 in public, line by line, sentence by sentence, let a group of the 3 of us come back and give you something, taking Brian's document and Steve's answers and some other information we've gotten, and produce something.
What about external counsel? Because that was one of the questions I asked, and I think we should bite the bullet and get external counsel or,
Some special, you're talking about a specialist?
I mean, whether we use
Someone who's competent with
the person from CDD or some other person.
Yeah.
I mean, shouldn't we have some
Tom may
external
even have a
representation?
recommendation, maybe.
I'm not the person to recommend counsel here.
No, I mean, Tom may have a
Oh,
recommendation.
Tom, okay, sorry.
Can we have Tom meet with CDD's lawyer and with these 3 gentlemen?
Tom hasn't been included in this conversation yet because we haven't gotten that far. I think you have the options of, you can talk to Tom and see if there's expertise on their team to utilize that, find a different party. I think though, as the third-party beneficiary of this agreement, having the same attorney as the 2
CDD.
major parties may not be within your best interest. It may make more sense. for
Yeah,
you
we
to
should have
find
someone-
looking out just for you.
Someone for us.
We could Google that.
So
Yeah. We know some attorneys.
do we need the attorney within the next 2 weeks?
Yes.
Yes.
To help guide-
Can as Vaughn, David, and Kevin and Jackson are working through this, you can have the conversation with Tom and come up with a recommendation based off of that conversation.
That's fair.
Okay.
That's a good start.
Because I think what happens here is if we all of a sudden figure out we can move forward, then, you know, going back to what we saw earlier, we got to sit here and say, okay, what would going forward even mean? When we look at the total cash available and the $2.5 million, because there's a lot of things that have to be thought about here. You know, Jack said you could start with some build out and add to it in the future and stuff like that. So I mean, there's a lot of difficult decisions here that kind of parlay together.
And $2.5 million may, you know, we go back to the sheets that you did, we may say, here's the timing that we would like, and we need $3.5 million to make this a go.
Well, the
I
design,
mean, everything is negotiable here.
the design firm is going to be a huge asset to help you get there too. So the first question, do you take the money based on the stipulations that have been put in place? And then once you decide you're going to take the money, utilize the design firm to help you figure out what this box is going to look like.
Right.
Right now, it's just do you take the money for a box? And then what does the box look like?
Yeah, I would suggest that we not get ahead of ourselves, that the first step is that we have this document that's been talked about for a couple of months now. There's been a lot of comment about it. There was prior comment before there ever was an interlocal. Let's try and identify or isolate the primary items that people are concerned about on this board in order to make a moving forward decision, just to move to the next step. So before we ever get to the design, external counsel and so on. Is that a reasonable charge to give us?
And we'll have that first on the agenda for 2 weeks from tonight. Sound good? We're closer on this for now? Okay. Moving on, we're doing great on time. Review of results from February survey. This was simply preliminary for you. This would be presented to the residents, not in this format, but in PowerPoint slides at the board meeting at the end of April. What Debbie and I wanted to share with you is this is a draft report. Is the style, content, way it's laid out helpful for you? Do you want to see something different? Because doing something different, you're looking at the authors. So just tell us. This is the style we've used for the last 3 reports. So it's a question to you. And then what happens then is the bulk of the report, the narrative, the charts is about 8 pages. That would go into the May edition of the Celebration News. JR has usually offered a 2-page spread for that. He's not looking at me, so he's not even nodding his head.
We can keep it to 2, Greg.
We would keep it to 2. And so that report, as is, without the cover page, would be as part of the May edition. So we're public with it. It goes on the website. The last 3 reports are on the website. So the question is, how's the format for you?
I've read the whole thing and it looked good to me. I think people are going to focus on those bar charts.
Of course.
Quite a bit.
They're not going to read the words we wrote.
Well, there's going to be people, there are people that read this. There are people that are definitely going to read it, but I think the bar graphs are going to be an asset to what's written, what's in writing.
Is there, I mean, please be picky, like the scale wasn't clear, or don't know what you mean by this or that, or colors didn't work. I mean, any suggestions?
I thought it was terrific. I really appreciate the work that both of you put into it. It condensed a whole lot of information, and I thought it was very consistent in the narrative with the comments. I thought that you were very fair and extracted the right balance of comments to reach your narrative.
You know, the appendices, again, is so raw. I mean, and the only thing taken out is names. That's the only thing. Typos exist. I know what spell check does. I did not touch it, but those comments are rich. There's no order to them. They're just clustered into groupings.
Maybe put a disclaimer in there that those aren't your typos.
This is not from Professor.
Yeah, right. Man has a doctoral degree, a PhD, and he can't even spell.
That's probably a good idea, because we want to maintain the integrity of it.
I thought it read fine. What it lighted up in my mind was, okay, we've talked about prioritization here. We already know there are people thinking about what happened with July 4th, and there's other comments about what Lexington may or may not do. Right. I think you're going to,
right.
I think the article is perfectly fine. I think we're going to have to be prepared for 3 or 4 sets of questions when you talk about Halloween, when you talk about Christmas, when you talk about snowfall and stuff like that, because it's just going to open up the what's changing. I like my town how it is comments. So,
I like my town how it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That's going to be a little tough because a lot of the comments in there deal with outsiders.
Yeah. A lot of them
deal with outsiders, and it's going to possibly ruffle some feathers.
Yeah.
For visitors.
Yeah. Now, the raw comments don't get published out there.
They're not going to get put in here?
The first 8 pages.
Just the first 8 pages.
Oh, okay,
all
so the comments are not
There's
going
20, 30 pages of appendices. Those don't get published. They're for you. They're for us.
Oh, okay.
I think to put those out there like that is...
Okay.
I think there's I think the way I view this is there's an implicit trust with the people who are writing sentences, paragraphs.
That they're not going out.
and they're assuming that it's for our leadership decision-making, so it's this team that looks at those and we distill them. And there's a lot of richness there. I mean, there's a lot of richness there. And they're not formally analyzed. I mean, that would be massive to do, to code everything beyond a category. But I think we can all read, you know, what they're saying. So I think the caution is we don't put that out there. We use that for our decision-making and our learning. I mean, we can go, frankly, we go back to last May and look at porch and yard sale, and I hope every time there's a porch and yard sale that the staff and whomever is planning goes back and looks at it and says, yeah, we got to remember to do that. So that,
if we look at,
does that help allay some of your?
Oh, definitely. I agree. The comments don't belong, and you just go with the narrative and the charts.
Right.
so just as an example, table 4 on page 8, is that something that would be published?
Table 4 on page 8?
Yes, and it references specific comments on individual activities, but it's your chart, so it may say Halloween as an example, responses 51, parking crowds, hours police. That's not coming up, that's not getting published, or that will? I'm sorry, I'm on what you sent me.
Oh,
Yes, that one.
Oh, table 4? Oh, table 4, got it. Specific comments, so that gets published just like that.
So is there a way that we can go ahead, let me pull it back up, and specify what is maybe a CROA owns operation, what is a partnered operation, and what is a third party? So as an example, Food Truck Friday, that's a CROA operation. If a resident has certain requests, we have full say. If it's July 4th, that's a combination, because we do the parade in the morning, we don't have to.
Maybe an editorial note.
Yeah, just something
That's a good idea.
to clarify.
That's a good idea.
What we have control over.
Halloween is not a sponsored activity.
Snowing, we don't have control
It's
as
snowing is
CROA.
Lexington. Porch
So-
and yard sale is CROA, Jeter Bend is
Exactly.
Residents.
Jeter Bend.
So if CROA has say, if you will, for lack of a better term,
Good suggestion, Kevin.
If we have responsibility, then yeah.
because unfortunately, there's certain things we can't.
We can do an editorial note there. And we did not do that in the survey intentionally,
That's fine.
because it
That's
wasn't a
perfectly
matter
fine.
of pointing fingers. But that's helpful. It's a helpful comment, thank you. Anything else on that for this point? Next point is July 4th. This was raised because we were hearing, and then we've gotten more formal news that Lexington is not going to sponsor fireworks.
I spoke with Mike Nunes, who's the marketing and event organizer for Lexington, and he told me that this year officially they will not be running a 4th of July event. So that means no concert downtown, no fireworks, nothing from an evening event standpoint downtown.
And when we did the survey, just the preliminary results, we separated July 4th fireworks from July 4th activities.
And this ties into why I made that comment, because if this is going to be published in the newspaper and residents start seeing that it's not happening, everyone will understand it's not something that we were able to control.
I think that's a whole separate conversation.
Yes.
I mean, are we publishing something, or, I mean, it's not a CROA event.
It's in
is
the
it?
community. I mean, it's being discussed openly. So, I mean, we should publish something in the newspaper or something says this is what's happening on the 4th.
Well, when logistically, I think we're gonna have to get out in front of the crowds one way or the other, because even if we don't, people are used to having fireworks here, and they're gonna show up. So signs, whatever we need to do to be able to notify folks that there's no fireworks this year.
Yeah, no, we haven't had them every year, so.
So what's the
It's been
history?
a while,
It's been a
though.
while.
It's been a long time since they haven't had
3
them.
years.
No, we've had them consistently for quite a few years, I believe. There was 1 year early on where there was a skip, but 2016, CROA picked them up when Lexington decided they weren't going to do them.
Can you explain more about that?
CROA didn't pick up the fireworks.
No, CROA picked up the event, but initially, Lexington wasn't going to do anything. And we took over the entire event, and then they came back in and said, okay, we want to contribute with fireworks.
So factually, we did not budget because we haven't budgeted for it for years, correct? No?
You're correct. The money that we used back in 2016 came from the Celebration Community Services funds.
Right.
Okay, it didn't come out of our normal funds anyway.
Yeah, and just to give a little background on that, CCS funds are funded by CJC, so we add another alphabet in there, but the joint committee funds $20,000 per year into CCS, which is to be able to provide events for outside of Celebration, help promote Celebration. It's not resident-only events, and you can't use those dollars to say we're going to have a resident-only event, because CCS is an entity that would be utilized to help promote and enhance Celebration.
And just speaking on behalf of the Community Events Committee, we were discussing the 4th of July and other things, but we just haven't resolved issues dealing with traffic, safety. We have a lot of work to do on that yet before we could just say, yeah, we're going to do this. We wouldn't be ready. I think we need more time to look at that, to make it safe, make traffic flow better, and I just don't think there's enough time for us to get involved in this into a fireworks event.
And this is not about fireworks, but just the last 4 surveys, starting with porch and yard sale back in May, concern about traffic and parking keeps coming and coming for everything. And then it just explodes when you have Halloween, when you have it snowing, you have fireworks, things get much worse. So there's a lot of frustration with
Can we separate traffic from 4th of July? And the reason why I'm going to say this is, let's think outside of the box when it comes to 4th of July. I think this town it's Americana. It's something that we're proud of. It's something that we're known for. Let's be real. The community is called Celebration. We need to look at something. This can't be a surprise that Lexington is not doing it. A couple of years ago, I would have said to you, they will be discontinuing their partnership. It was known. It's clear. Now, when it comes to traffic, for the sake of the residents, that's what we are. We are CROA. We are for the residents. Maybe we don't do an event downtown. Maybe we do a barbecue. Maybe we do smaller barbecues in different villages. We need to do something. We cannot let 4th of July come and go. And I know that's going to be a difficult challenge. We have staffing, we have budgeting. You're going to have a lot of disappointment. You're going to have a lot of disappointment.
So recreate or reimagine.
And I would actually prefer it not to be downtown, not only for traffic. And of course, we want to work well with the businesses in town, especially those that are owned by residents. But a cut of every sale that happens at those businesses goes back into Lexington's pocket. They get a cut. So if we as CROA are sponsoring this, we're actually just giving the money to them.
So what is planned right now for July 4th is the parade. Period.
Yes.
And there were a lot of comments from the vets to, a lot of the vets.
Oh, the vets, absolutely.
Yeah, they were interested in keeping the parade going and some patriotic events during that.
A couple of years ago, we had a community picnics that were in each village had their own picnic. Okay. I know you have not staffed for the 4th of July, so that's not available to us. We haven't budgeted for it, but I would prefer that we get a community picnic. Each area's got their own area that they can hold a picnic. You're going to have to reach out to various community leaders in each of these villages to hold it.
Like a potluck type?
Yeah,
something like that.
I agree with Jack. I was going to say, Debbie and Jack probably both remember when we did block parties in the early years. Those were pretty organic. They came from people on the streets who just wanted to get together and rolled out their grills, and we got permission to close down some streets, not every street, but a street in a community, but now we've got more park area. I think that would be a wonderful way to celebrate.
In fact, we do have trailers with lots of chairs and seats.
Block party trailer.
Some of our stuff was, can you comment on what we still have in inventory for there was a trailer,
the block party trailer?
Party trailer.
Oh, that's right, the party trailer.
Tom, you bring the table, please. Come. Some of our stuff's just old and outdated.
Bring your own.
Yeah, most of it is outdated. Since I've been here, we haven't had a party trailer in use. It's been used for storing the stage because it's so large, but we can easily put it back together if we wanted.
And the items are just like the tables and chairs. We have a food truck Friday and all that stuff. We could just throw it in a trailer.
Yeah, tables, chairs. I'm sure there was extension
I can tell you, there's a lot of neighborhood parks, Tohi, Archer, there's a lot of them that organically have their own little area parties, and they'll bring out game trucks, and they do all kinds of stuff with it. You know, from a 4th of July standpoint, I think in my email I sent you all, it's so hot. I mean, by the time we're done with the parade, everyone's sweating, it's hot, it's humid. Personally, I see 4th of July people, they're in water or they're in air conditioning. It's just not enjoyable to sit outside on a July day.
I guess because how I think about 4th of July is just, I go to the parade every time I'm here. My wife and I love it. We'll actually sit with Ron and his wife. And we will get out of the sun during the day, and then in the evening we end up having a picnic with a few neighbors. We would watch the fireworks here. I think what you're going to end up with is, if there's not going to be fireworks, I think you're going to end up with a whole bunch of people, as long as you give them proper advance noticing, figuring out where they want to go stand to watch Disney fireworks at night or stuff like that, or else go out with their own kids. I think people will make ulterior plans. I worry less about the 4th of July than I do about Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. If Lexham were to say they were dropping all of that, then it changes the charm of the town, and I think people will get over one day, 60 days or 75 days.
Let me tie into that. Let me tie into that. Now snowing is not on Lexington's website for events this year.
And they told me 95% chance that they're not doing it.
So we need to give the residents something. That's our job.
I just have one caution. When everybody knows there's not going to be fireworks, we're going to see a proliferation of fireworks.
You are going to have neighborhood fireworks being shot off. And I think for 2019, plenty of time for us to plan and have a great 4th of July. Well, I think we did a great 4th of July in 2016, and it was right along what Kevin said. It was an all-Americana 4th of July. It was just a different feel to the event. For me, it doesn't make sense to me why you would do a Halloween theme on 4th of July. 4th of July is the holiday. It's celebrating the country. I think that we have a great special events team, special events committee that can help plan for 2019. I think we have a task force that's willing to help solve the traffic and parking and cleanliness and safety problems, and we have plenty of time to get there. It's just, I think if we do something for this year, in 2018, we're a couple months out, and it's going to be thrown together. It's not going to be the same quality of CROA events that we typically put on.
Right.
I don't mean to call you out, Eileen. You're on special commits. Do you have any comments?
You have to come to
I hate to call you out like this, and I don't mean it, but I appreciate your input and I appreciate your involvement as a resident.
You know, I think we've got the parade, which I think is a very, very nice event. We've always had some discussions in the committee about doing what some of you may remember, Lights and Lemonade, other community events that I think basically some people would have a block party, or I agree that it takes a long time to plan a really first-rate event, and I think it would be rushing it. But I think with the parade, if perhaps we could come up with some ideas like the Lights and Lemonade, the kinds of things where we can encourage people to do something locally with their friends, families, in some of the small parks, that might work, and sort of fill in the gap until we can get to a really bigger event in 2019.
Grand plan. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And Kevin, I think you're absolutely correct. And CROA is more related to the businesses, but the businesses are going to suffer downtown if there's no events down there. And I think that if we just ignored them completely, then I think that would be a disservice to it. But
I agree.
Planning something good makes a lot of sense.
Didn't people typically clear out downtown though after the parade? Didn't they just, it kind of fizzled out in any way?
Most people go off and do what they do during the day. And
I don't know if they really lose any business.
It's typical behavior that
the evening, though.
You regroup in the evening when it starts to cool off, usually after that thunderstorm has rolled through and it starts to cool down a little bit. But even 5 o'clock is the hottest point in the day in the summer. And it's up to 94, 95 with 100% humidity. It's miserable outside.
So comment from the audience?
I just had an idea. What Jesse Opelka, 63 Market Street, apartment 220. What if we did the parade in the evening as a different thing, with like, just to mix it up a little bit? And it's cooler.
I hear what you're saying. The only thing that I would say is traditionally, Celebration residents love tradition. Does that make sense? I think that
ties into what I'm saying, though.
When we tried to change the date of the father-daughter dance the first year that I was here, from February to around Father's Day, there was a complete uproar in the community about that. So I would just caution, when I sit down with the special events committee, and when JR sits down with them at the beginning of the year, one of the things I caution is let's be careful on messing too much with traditional events, father-daughter dance, 4th of July parade, those types of events, because the community loves those events. Tweak them, make them better, but don't drastically change them. And when we changed the parade route, we got feedback just on the direction that people were going. I think ultimately people ended up liking it better, but that initial shock to the community is kind of tough to overcome.
Well, thank you for your creativity.
Yeah. No worries. I was just thinking.
Keep thinking.
But also, I think we can do whatever we want. If residents expect something, we could just ask for volunteers, and we can have whatever we want, really.
And we can make resources available.
If they're willing to volunteer and help out, or donate, or I don't know.
Tables and chairs, if you need them, we can make them available, those types of things.
So how do we want to wrap this conversation? We can revisit in 2 weeks. Now, clearly fireworks aren't happening. We hear that.
And could we add the discussion of the snowing event for the meeting in 2 weeks?
The only thing I would say though with this is if there's going to be consensus of the board for us to do something, JR is Superman. I'm sure he could pull something off on 4th of July, but the sooner the better, because every week that goes by is less time to plan and get ready for it.
Yeah.
I mean, we always could move from the parade and then either move something into Lakeside, or you could move something into
Might there be
Founder's
something
Day
that we
Park.
consider that after the
Something
parade
close
in
by.
Lakeside,
Barbecue.
and then people go their own way for the rest of the day?
I've suggested that many times.
A barbecue?
It's
I mean,
too early, the parade's too early for the barbecue. I suggested move the parade back to 11.
what about an evening barbecue? I know
I
that's,
don't think evening's gonna work. I think people are gonna make plans around fireworks and stuff.
they're going to be at
Starts
downtown
raining,
regardless.
And the reason why we never talked about food at Lakeside is because it takes away from the businesses downtown. And I know that there's some conversation about that cut that Lexington's getting, but the businesses downtown shouldn't suffer based
I
on
agree.
what's going on with that.
Can we, and not to go too far from 4th of July, one thing came up last week that I reached out about getting the CJC together sooner than later. This is going to be an additional reason why I'd like to get that done. I think 10 weeks of 2 new people sitting on the CJC going by before we have our first meeting is concerning. So that's going to be my second request, to see if we can get that possible. I'm sorry, Brian.
As a matter of procedure, can 2 of us on CJC petition for a meeting?
It says in writing, yep. So if you just submit something together, and we can.
Perfect.
So we'll start that process.
What can we do to get a firm answer from Lexington? Because it affects a number of things we've got to plan for this year. I mean, we can't sit here and it's September and then say, oh, you know, we need to know reality.
You're better off expecting nothing, and if something happens, you're surprised.
Brian, to answer that question, I asked for a firm answer, a verbal confirmation, and I got a firm, there will not be a 4th of July, and then I got a firm 95% chance that there will not be enough snowing moving forward.
You mean no fireworks? We're having the 4th of July, but not fireworks.
No, so what I'm talking about is Lexington-sponsored concert 4th of July, traditional event that they do downtown.
Yeah.
And then 95% chance that there's not going to be. And I said, well, when will you know that there's a 100% chance? And he said that they're talking about it, and he would get back to me when they know that it's a 100% chance. And I told him I'm going to be sharing this with the CROA board at the workshop, so I need to get a definite answer from you. So I don't think that you're going to get a proclamation in downtown saying they're not doing this. I think that that's what we're getting from them, is that verbal confirmation. So 95%, you know, if I'm betting, I'm going to go down Kevin's route if it's not happening. 95% is a big number.
Is there,
so just go ahead.
Is there a possibility that the businesses down there get together and have the event by themselves?
I think that it's wide open on the possibilities of what could happen. I mean, I don't know what their response is going to be when they find out that there's no events taking place.
That's a big CJC and Kanoa conversation.
And Kanoa doesn't put on events. Kanoa doesn't have any dollars.
But they own all of that. So CJC
Well,
can take their funds and
We
could
know
allow
it's been
it.
spoken about July 4th, but at the end of the day, July 4th is one day. When you think about the merchants, when you think about Halloween through Thanksgiving through Christmas, that is when they make all their money. I mean, we're talking about downtown, and we need to really have a serious conversation
And
sooner.
that's, yeah, and
rather
I'm
than
proposing that as one of our workshop agenda items in 2 weeks. All right, so for closure for this, in 2 weeks, we will look at just any later thoughts about activities, and as well as about how to get out in front in terms of communication.
And Steve will follow up with Lexon to see if he can learn anything else.
See if I can get that additional 5%, or if it's gonna go down.
So we're doing well on time. We have, next item on the agenda is athletic recreation fields, timeline, restrooms, the concession stand, that whole package. And then we had some shorter items that we want to make sure we save time for. So can we try to finish by 1:45?
I can probably do this in 2 minutes, if that's okay, unless
Well,
there's a
I'm
lot
sure
of
we're going to have
questions.
questions.
So right now, where we stand with this is with TCC, you have to do 3 rounds of permitting. The first round is conceptual, that was approved with some comments. Those comments are being addressed and have been resubmitted or will be resubmitted this week, I believe, for the design development phase. And then when I spoke with Mark, our engineer, I asked him if he could ask them to approve design and final at the same time. I don't know whether that's doable or not. They may come back and say, okay, we can approve final if you do A, B, C, and D. So just to give you an idea of what some of the comments were from conceptual, it was, what is the light spill photometrics going to look like from Golf Park, from the facility? And the reason why we recommended these LED lights is because the number is 0. You won't see 0 light spill at all. Once you get off of the edge of the field, it goes from 7 to 0 immediately. So you won't see any spill from that. Just some comments like that, some comments about landscaping, those types of things. So we're working through those TCC plans. They have about 15 days that they say after they get the final plans to approve those. Then the next one is going to be the one that's a little bit more complicated. That's the Reedy Creek permitting. There are some conversations going back and forth about mitigation for wetlands on the property, and there's some back and forth conversations about where the wetlands are, and based on which map you're looking at, which wetland are you talking about. Reedy Creek has their own set of floodplains and shows one thing, and the FEMA map doesn't show it. So we have submitted the map that doesn't show it for approval, but we're looking at a possible mitigation in 2 different places. There's about 1.4 acres that could cost up to $20,000 for wetland mitigation credits. And then there's a second area that could easily be redesigned to avoid any type of mitigation wetlands, and that's down where we had proposed a possible future playground in Second Pavilion. So nothing has been approved for building there. That could easily be modified from the design.
In the original proposal, I think you had estimated potentially as much as $80,000 for wetlands mitigation. Was that to the county, or the county and Reedy Creek?
This is one time to Reedy Creek, and that for the wetland mitigation. And what I'm hearing now is it's closer to 20,000. If you look at my original slides, it had 4 question marks after.
Yes, right.
It was
I remember
a complete guess at that. So they're saying closer to $20,000 for.
But that's the only entity to which we would be obligated to make a mitigation credit. There would be nothing to the state of Florida or to the county.
That's the way I understand it. It's a one-time, and I'm not completely versed on how many different entities, but it's not each one of them $20,000. It would be $20,000 fee to cover all of them that need to be covered.
And one final question. Is legal counsel reviewing that?
Legal counsel reviewing
the mitigation fees?
We haven't received them yet because we're still in the process of debating whether or not they need to be paid. So part of that is this environmentalist that you see here, that between $5,000 and $10,000. So for environmentalists to come out and do a wetland permitting information, and as soon as Mark gets to the point where he is recommending that we do that, it'll be on your agenda to approve at a public meeting, to approve the hiring of environmentalists for the wetlands. So you're a couple stages down the road before you would send that to legal to approve it. But the environmentalist is the one that's going to be able to tell you whether or not the wetland needs to be mitigated.
Thank you.
I'm hopeful the answer is no. The the area that you're speaking of, it's not on the golf course property at all, right?
No, it's on the athletic field.
Just want to make sure it's.
Well, and I asked, is there anywhere, and so you have floodplain also, and I asked, is there any way you could do on the golf course property to offset some of the floodplain stuff, and they're looking at that also.
Okay.
And it really is just for where the water can go, how much drainage and those types of things. So.
Okay.
And then South Water Management District is kind of tied in with Reedy Creek. So all the things that you see that we have to do for Reedy Creek have to be done for South Water. You have the FTEP for utility, and that's what we need is a decision on whether or not we're going to put tap outs or pull outs for the utilities where the possible community building will go, so that they can get that permit done with ECDD, and that's a $600 fee to do that. So I think it's going to come along with the conversation of whether or not we're going to do a community center building, and if we're doing a box of 25,000 square feet, is it going to go close to the CDD building, or is it going to go closer to the athletic field complex? Because you got to put some stuff out there.
When do we need? When do they need to know that?
It will come after the environmentalist conversation and the TCC conversation. So I think by May, we're going to need to have some decision on that.
But we could theoretically just put in a $600 box and just have it there.
Yeah, and then, well, you could pay the permitting fee and design it there and
then
go
run
from there.
from there.
Or you could ask them to approve it in both places and see how that works. But so what we're looking at then, and then everything will go through Osceola County for the final. Osceola County is actually the easiest permitting out of all these permits. Once you get the TCC approval, they'll go through that, and we have, as part of our fees that we've paid to Mark already, or that we'll have to pay as part of the overall contract, the Gopher Tortoise survey that will be conducted. And then if all this can get done by June, then we could break ground, and it's going to be 6 months construction. That's in the construction contract. So estimated completion time frame of January, possibly December, probably safer to say January.
So,
and if you get a hurricane or crazy weather over the summer, you could go back to February or March of next year.
So the decision on the new building with the bathrooms and that has to be made by what date?
Everything that you're doing here from a permitting standpoint, when you decide on the bathrooms, is going to have to start for that building also. You're going to have to get TCC's approval. The Reedy Creek and all of that will be a lot easier because it's not down near where the wetland and the floodplain conversations are. But your time frame for building the building, I think he said, was around 6 months also. So if this is going to open in January, the further you push down the road is how long that restroom is going to take. Did that come across right? So if you decide on a restroom there in July, you're probably talking about the restroom opening in February or March, as opposed to.
We need a time together.
Different question on that. Would there, tonight we might be able to get a sense of the board about whether to go forward with a restroom facility. Should we decide in the affirmative, can that be infused into these earlier ones now?
It can. It's going to slow down the process. So if you want everything open at the same time, then everything gets moved back a little bit. If you work them as two different phases, you could technically open the athletic fields first with some sort of temporary restroom for a couple months and then have the building open after.
What type of a time difference are you thinking?
It just depends on how quickly we can get a decision on the restroom. So if it's 6 months down the road for a decision on the restroom, then it's 6 months after.
No. If we're saying maybe by the end of April, let's just say we had a decision. On the restrooms.
There's multiple decisions in there, whether to go forward and then a matter of deciding what to do.
I see what you're saying.
To me, you got two questions. Do you build a building, yes or no, and then what type of a building? And to me, do you build a building, yes or no, we ought to be able to resolve very quickly. And
you're talking about bathroom buildings?
Yeah, and the one that in here that's scoped out, and then whether you shrink it or not, I think is a decision. I don't mind it being a couple months late, but I just have a hard time possibly envisioning having a field that we're going to have a bunch of girls playing on with no bathrooms. I just think that's nuts. So to me, I think we have to have the bathrooms.
Yeah, and really, just to be clear, in looking at the plans that Danny submitted, we keep saying bathrooms. That's kind of a misnomer. It's really two big locker rooms. it's not just a single stall, it is a locker room for men and a locker room for women.
I don't think it's locker room. There are restrooms with stalls, and then there's meeting space and storage space.
He designated, he called it a locker room.
He said a locker room. Yeah.
Well,
the locker-
I'm not saying they're lockers per se, I'm just saying, I just want to make clear that we're not talking about a bathroom like in this building, you walk in and there's,
2 stalls, 3
Right,
stalls.
right.
The locker rooms would be more of sectioned off spaces that the different youth and sports organizations could store stuff in.
Yeah,
So there's
it's
storage?
not changing room area at all.
Storage.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Locker.
It's not changing room area at all for the bathrooms. It's strictly storage space is what that locker room is.
It's a bad
Terminology,
definition.
yeah.
It should not be called locker, it's
This is
more
all
of a storage
storage
space.
area.
But there's a men's and women's, and then there's a whole concession side, and then there's a whole side for meeting space that could be divided off.
And I have one other question. Based on the numbers that you ran, Brian, it looks like we have an ample amount of funds to build that building that Danny proposed at around $500,000. Is that an accurate summary of your study?
I mean, we're not looking at overruns or anything either.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, that, we had $500,000 in there for everything. If we do
Right.
20,000 for
Wetlands.
turtles or whatever it was you were talking about, other things, I mean, then you got 480. I mean, it's,
Okay.
and there was other pockets of cash. So, I mean, yes, we will get through this year in fine
And
shape.
and that's through December 2018.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have some more monies coming in early next year. We've got the money to do what we need to do here. We just need to decide.
So we should decide this, or April, our next meeting, we should.
Well, do we have a sense that this is something we want to proceed with?
Yes.
I think
In
we
terms
need
of
to get the
concession
bathrooms
stand, there's concession also, right?
There is, and then pretty large meeting space that can be
Okay.
divided up.
So, and what Danny has designed was estimated to cost about $500,000.
And he said at the last meeting, that's probably a high estimate.
Right. So we can start looking at that, we can start budgeting, making sure we have money for overruns. But is there a sense that this is what we want to proceed with sooner rather than later?
I would.
Yes.
I would say yes.
Jack, you didn't nod or shake.
No, I'm fine with it. The only consideration we had before was the thought of a civic center being built. We would probably put some storage space in the civic center
Or
in the
meeting
meeting rooms,
space, yeah.
which would not require us to have such a large facility, but who knows what we're going to do with the civic center right now.
Right.
I mean, I think to the extent that we've got the funds potentially to do it, we know there's a need for this, for bathrooms and for some concessions, and we want to move to create a really high-quality space. Since the board committed itself to this project, let's do it right.
Do it right.
That's right.
And let's move expeditiously to get that part done, and then we can take the next step and the next step if we have
The
to.
other reason that I would probably commit to the bigger building is we know that then we're in a lean shape. Even if we get an interlocal we like, how much of a building are we going to then want to have?
Yeah.
And are we going to defer a little, or are we going to have to build it leaner? There's a lot of questions that are going to follow behind that are far from certain.
And there's other questions, just to put it back on the table, as with whatever facility, if we have a facility, a new facility, not the concession stand, like a civic center, do we want to revisit this building enhanced? Do we want to revisit Stetson?
It's assumed
So
that
we
the
need a
community
different
center is going there.
conversation. And so maybe the building, if there is a building there, is simply recreation and not so much civic. Because, the call for indoor courts or whatever you might do indoor from an athletic point of view. So we need to step back. That's part of that larger strategic plan, goal 1, I think, can be part of that. So the concession stand, we know we need to, well, the sense of the board is we want to move forward on.
What I would like Steve to very much do, though, is we need to be sitting here looking at an itemization of real numbers, because it gets very easy to say 2.8, another 500 here, and here's this, and then we're going to spend 20 and 40. When we have regular board meetings, we need to come and we need to be sitting here. We've thrown something out on TV that said, $4.5 million. I don't want to be sitting here a year from now saying, well, it was $4.9 million and no one told us. As we're sitting here and we find out that mediation on wetlands is going to cost $80,000, we at least need to be tracking these things as we.
Well, and that was what I was talking about earlier when I said tie every expense back into that number into your,
Yeah.
so that we can see what the real number is that gets attached. And then I would request that Danny come back to us with a set of plans on a change order for the contractor so that we can actually start to nail this down as to what he's got and what it's going to cost.
And change order for,
Well, the board signed an agreement which did not include this building.
right,
Rather than creating a brand-new agreement, it strikes me that the best way to do it is a change order to that agreement that you signed prior to the switchover of the board with the same contractor. He's on site, he's doing the work. I presume that that's who we would want to do it.
By law, do we have to have competitive bids, though? That's what I would have thought.
Well, I think
Or what's
the change order is gonna be if you ask him to redesign the building. If you give me the consensus today to ask Danny to now take this design that he's put together and put it out there on the street and get 3 bids, he's gonna go back to the same companies that bid on the street and the athletic fields. And I'm willing to bet Arnco can probably give you the best price because they're already gonna be mobilized in there. So we can get that process started right away. If this is the building that we wanna look at. What complicates this is if we decide that we wanna shrink this building and redesign it.
I would go along with Jackson in one area on this, though. Once we've already offered this contract to Arnco, it's probably not gonna get McCree and them to even bid on it.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, if you want to go to some other companies
You
that
don't
are
remember-
builders to do it, but I don't think McCree and the other one are going to bid on it all once they've lost the contract.
Right, and I apologize for interrupting you, Jack, but remember Tom Slayton in the legal update, you don't have to get 3 bids. You
I
have
know.
to submit
Just submit them
to
and
at
then-
least 3 companies for the bid. So
Yeah.
he submitted to 6 or 7, I believe, so we can put them back out there. And if they all come back and say, we're just not willing to bid
Well,
because you
I'm
gave
just
Arnco
saying,
the
you
project.
may want to go to somebody besides somebody who's building fields, some general contractor
Right,
builds
for
buildings
buildings.
too.
Well, David, this was agended for tonight.
right.
Could we take action on it tonight? And
Yeah.
in terms of authorizing Steve to go out and place
Absolutely.
those requests so that we're not wasting more time, not wasting, but not
Can I
using
make
more time?
one more comment to that, Jackson? You asked me about getting more specific numbers. Right now, this is an estimate. You're gonna get your specific numbers after you get your RFP out in the street, and then you're gonna know what your costs are gonna be.
But if we do a change order, what's the pricing on,
Isn't that an RFP on the change order?
Maybe we say,
Go ahead.
you know, all this work that we're doing, there doesn't need to be a change order. We just need you now to submit it out there to the companies again so that we can get a bid on it. And
So we need
Danny,
some
we want to
competition.
use this amazing building that you just designed, because I think there was a little bit of disappointment that he designed this and we weren't doing anything with it. So let me have that conversation with him and we'll see how that goes. But I think if you give me direction tonight to proceed with bidding this building that he's designed, then he can start TCC and everything else and go from there.
When Danny was here with the previous board,
Yeah.
didn't he mention, or didn't the previous board request to put that on hold for a certain number of days? I think he said maybe 90 days, if the new board came in and said that they wanted to go ahead and do that
was-
building?
That was honoring the prices for,
What was that for?
the withdrawal from the septic tank and some of the other things.
What should be
With the
replaced?
existing
The lift
contractor,
station.
and they did do that. They've honored those prices if you come back within 90 days and say you want
Okay,
it.
so let's keep that deadline in mind then for the new
and
building.
this company, building a concession stand type building is within their
They built-
history and there's,
It is. They
Oh,
built
yeah,
the
they're
CDD
building
building
the
and they're
Presbyterian
building
Church.
the
oh,
Presbyterian
so that's the same, okay.
recreation building.
Okay.
You want to make your motion?
Yeah, I move that we authorize management to pursue a bathroom concession stand building and to get the necessary bids for construction.
In keeping with what was previously
Was already
submitted
designed.
and in the blueprints or whatever you call this.
As modified by Brian.
Second it.
I'm sorry.
I'll second
Thank
that. And that will
Second.
include the tap-ins for the community center, depending on what happens with that?
That's a separate conversation with Mark about the permitting fee with ECDD. So we won't know exactly where those are going to go until we decide what we're doing with the 25,000 square foot building.
I think they're
But
two
I can
separate
ask
projects
him,
and we
yeah,
need to
I think you have to separate this.
keep them separate.
Okay.
Okay. No,
I'll
we're
second
not
the
actually
motion.
authorizing the expenditure.
No, your
Just the-
expenditure
just the
will come
grant.
back. I can't spend those dollars
Right.
without your approval
Right.
based on the RFPs.
My motion is just to direct you to
I
begin
just
that
want to clarify
process.
for people,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'll second the motion.
I already did it.
Oh, you
Jack,
did too late,
Jack,
man.
you're too late.
I did it before you.
Thank you, Jack. All right, so any discussion, any further discussion on this? So call the question?
Call the question.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, unanimous. All right, thank you. You have enough on that?
That's enough, yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Some shorter things, I hope, in our remaining 15 minutes. CROA Board of Conduct to finalize. Thank you, Steve, for updating the wording. My only comment would be to capitalize board as it's done elsewhere in the document. And what we've done here in that first paragraph was including basically what's required by law without saying this is required by law, but that's inferred.
Let me pull it up.
There's no signal showing.
I unplugged it because I was sending an email real quick, but unplug it back in for you. Trying to multitask. So, David, I think what you're seeing here, the general specific rules, this is the standard code of conduct that the board has always signed. The conversation that you've been having is centered around communication.
That's a whole section that was added.
Right, and at the last meeting, you asked me to put, what does the law say?
Right.
And then in the spirit of the law, this is what CROA is going to do. So this is what the law says about board of director meetings.
Right. What the law says is the first paragraph.
Correct.
And then the second paragraph is what we will strive to do, which we've already been striving to do.
But weren't we going to, I brought it up last meeting, aren't we going to include something about oral communication, private, meetings? All we talk about is text and email.
Well, the law is, I think what Tom was telling you is he's interpreting the law based on different places within there. And there's some portions of statute 720 that say that you can call in to a meeting. Therefore, when you're on the phone, that constitutes getting together as a quorum and meeting together. And you all dug deeper and said, well, what about Facebook? What about email? None of those were actually getting together or utilizing what the law says about calling in, FaceTiming and calling in. So that was a mixture of a lot of different stuff, and I tried to include, if I tried to include all of that as it's stated in statute 720, it's going to be a mess in here. It's going to be.
It says limit business communication among board members to an open publicly noticed board meeting. But Jackson, myself, and Kevin are going to be meeting together to work on this other project we've been assigned, and that's, now where would that be covered in there?
I think as long as you communicate back, is that what we talked about?
And then we come back and communicate to the board in a workshop or a board meeting.
Yeah. And because we're not a quorum, and because we've been designated to do that in a public forum here, it's a noticed conversation, I would think. I mean, I recognize that this is a point of contention about how far do we go. I want to just say again that the spirit of what we're trying to do, I think, is as important as the actual implementation. We're trying to set a different tone for this board. We're trying to operate in a way that's more open and transparent than boards have had to be in the past because they were essentially developer controlled. And it's going to be messy. It's going, good God, my email. It's going to be a lot, and it's going to be uncomfortable. I think our discussions have been up to this point that we wanted to try this for a while and see how well it worked, how practical it was. So far, in spite of all of the challenges of email, it seems to have worked. And I would think that in the spirit of what we're talking about, there's not a reason for any of us to be unable to sign that code of conduct as Steve has revised it. I don't think there's anything in there that should keep anyone from feeling that they can't do their job as a board member of CROA.
So, with that said, this meeting between the three of us, does that get noticed somehow? Does that get published? How
we to morally do it correct. I mean, to do it how I would like to see it, I'd like to meet somewhere here in town hall to do the discussions.
Yeah,
do that.
It's not, you don't meet at a house. You don't. It's if somebody wants to sit in, sit in.
I have a question regarding strategic goals where we have more than one person, sometimes 2 or 3 of us assigned. Does that mean we have to meet down in town hall for all of our meetings? Is that what you're asking us to do?
If I'm involved in it, that's what I would prefer to do.
Me too.
If I'm meeting with, I haven't spoken to a single board member here unless it was through an email that Steve is connected to, or if it was in person here. That's a lie. I did go ahead and I saw you separately downtown at Art and Wine Stroll. But as far as communicating, I'm going to be putting my best foot forward at all times to go ahead and have it in the public. So inclusive of strategic goals.
Well, I read the words as, it says strive. It's kind of vague to me. Are we 100% doing this? Or are we doing it to the best of our abilities? Who makes a decision that we have not?
You, individually.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's self-regulating. I mean, I'm not looking to catch somebody making a mistake here. I think we've got an obligation to you to do it the right way. You know, and I think if we fail to meet that obligation, then we ought to say, hey, we messed up, and here's the problem, and here's what we did, and here's what we're doing to rectify it. But I agree with Kevin. There's not a reason we shouldn't be able to meet here and to be in a situation where we're talking and inviting those people that want to participate to participate.
If it's more convenient to meet at someone's house?
I mean, I think it's okay if you're working on a goal, as
I
long
think
as
if
you're
you're working on a
communicating.
goal.
Yeah. I
What
mean,
if
because I
you
know that
can't
some of
get
this.
space here?
Some of the survey stuff, well, just my computer access and your computer access.
I think from the standpoint of that scenario, you all just voted at a or you gave consensus at a publicly noticed meeting that you want 3 people, so there's no surprises here. You guys aren't off sneaking around doing something yourself.
Yeah.
You all gave them that direction. The reality here is, folks, you guys all live here. It's not that big of a community overall from a square footage standpoint. You're gonna run into each other.
Yeah.
You're saying in the spirit, though, you're not going to say, hey, I'm gonna do this, this, and this to try and get everyone else to vote the way that I want them to vote.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's just on the vote.
So I know a later conversation, we'll be talking about the website and how that can be more, how some of our smaller discussions, like the 3 or 2 of us, can be noticed without so formal. I mean, I wonder about some additional wording, for example. Like,
Well, I really struggle with additional wording. Vaughn and I live next door to each other. We talk 6 days a week, and we play golf, and we do all kinds of stuff, and we're going to talk about business. Jack and I had breakfast the other day just because he was catching me up so that I wasn't a moron on what's been going on in the building.
I think that's fine.
I don't think I should have to notice that meeting. I think I should be able to have. I trust you. I mean, I like getting copied on the emails. I think you've actually been doing an outstanding job on a lot of the emails. And I'm getting to the point where I say, okay, Kevin's going to run with this in good shape.
I am not going to be put in a position that I'm looked at differently. I'm not going to put myself in that spot.
Proposed additional sentence. At times, board members may find it necessary to meet or communicate with other board members in non-quorum settings.
That would be fun.
I mean, because that's what we're talking about. You met at breakfast.
Yeah.
We don't have to notice everything. The spirit is we're not hiding. That's the spirit.
You want me to just type it in real quick?
Yeah.
So you can see what it looks like? Where do you want it to go?
At times, I mean, Debbie's sick, I'm sick, you know, people, whatever. That wasn't a statement from fact. That's, no. So we're going to meet at her house, my house, Jack's a neighbor, lambast him in the alley.
Read it to me one more time. At times.
At times, board members may find it necessary to meet or communicate with other board members in non-quorum settings. We're not talking about a quorum. We're not talking, 4 we know we can't do.
We just have to be able to talk, yeah.
Say that again?
Yeah.
I get it.
Got it?
Oh, communicate's not good.
Yeah. So, does this, because it's what we're striving, and that's the point, we're striving.
Or Brian, you gotta move, or one of you guys.
I move to adopt this language in the code of conduct.
Well, you guys will approve it at your April 25th meeting.
Okay.
But if you guys are consensus or okay with it now, I'll pop it in the agenda the way it's written.
I'd
I'll fix some of the
please.
things.
You want to see it printed? Okay.
Yeah, I want to.
So what, you want to revisit this in 2 weeks? Just for one final look? Okay, and we'll have this by email before then. A couple of other agenda items. Town hall meetings, any thoughts?
if that community center situation, after we go ahead and discuss a couple of things, maybe we can come up with a plan A, plan B, plan C, and have the residents view it, have us all review it, and see if we take the money, this is the location of where it may go, this is what we're looking at, this is how it's affecting our financials, and then incorporate that into a town hall
So
meeting.
what's in your head with a town hall meeting? More free-flowing?
And I like this. This is actually kind of bringing that in, where each workshop we've opened conversation, and as somebody has something that pops up in your head, share it.
So we have board meetings, we
gonna-
have workshops, then we would have something different, a different mechanism.
I like town hall style, but.
My only question is, we got the town hall out here. You know, there are certain people who you start recognizing come to every single meeting. Are we gonna get more people is the question because we're even videotaping these things now, they're out there, so that's.
I envision something in which instead of us doing most of the talking, we're doing most of the listening. We invite the community to come in and talk to us initially and with us, and then invite into the conversation, rather than having an agendaed list of things that we're doing in a workshop. So I see it as an even more informal setting in which our primary focus is to invite a broader range of people, not that we don't love all of you, but to invite your friends and neighbors to come and talk on a specific subject.
I also envision these out in the community, not here.
Yes, they could be.
And a thought, which I don't think has been raised, I know that you talked in, I think, in the strategic planning time about doing, we're going to do the board.
The meet and greet.
The meet and greets. So maybe town hall meeting and there's some meet and greet stuff there.
Exactly.
Food, but it's a town hall, and it might be topic-based.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be every month. What I do like in the last few weeks is we've created the workshops to become more town hall style, and I appreciate that.
But I think we can start that. Do we have filming capability?
Not
like
recording.
at Heritage Hall, or at the North Village Pavilion, or at the amphitheater down in Artisan?
Not the way this is set up.
No, not how this is set up, but might there be some capability with some wired mics and so forth?
I would have to take a further look into that.
Okay. Okay.
Outside of this.
Okay.
And one other question about this.
Film.
Could
Camera's a camera, but clear audio.
Clear audio is the problem.
Yeah, clear
Okay.
audio.
Yeah. If we were doing a town hall meeting, could it be called by, say, the three of us for the purpose that we're doing, so that not all board members have to attend but could attend? Or if a strategic group were working and those two members wanted to call a town hall meeting, could they do that for the purpose of their strategic plan or their process?
Might be a little tricky.
I think the intent is right. I don't see it being viewed. I think every board member needs to answer individually.
Well, I mean, each board member would certainly be invited. I'm simply saying that rather than a meeting of the entire board that's a town hall meeting, could you also have town hall meetings that were more focused on a particular topic?
Right.
Gary,
That were...
Gary, you have a thought?
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt.
No, I'm done.
So you're talking about more of a task force kind of type, not a task force, but.
Not a task force.
Yeah.
God, it's just.
And we can try it and see how it goes.
Good answers. Try to see how it goes. Gary Hutz, but be careful what you ask for. I like the idea of having a town hall meeting that's structured with topics so that everybody comes to the table knowing that we're going to talk about this two or three subjects. Very much like the workshop here. Otherwise, it becomes a free-for-all. And then you will look bad in 8 months when you decide to cancel these meetings because they become a free-for-all. They'll say, why aren't you having it? Well, we couldn't handle it anymore. So you may want to think this through before you open it up.
I agree.
If they happen topic-based.
Because we've had.
Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest that there was no agenda. I just meant that the primary, thank you, Gary. I think the primary focus is to listen to the audience on that topic, and that there may be some topics that are more specific that certain board members are going to have a particular area of expertise or interest in, and that the entire board may not choose to be at every one of these town hall meetings. I'm just asking whether or not that, or are we committing ourselves to all 7 members being at every town hall meeting?
No.
I wouldn't.
if it were to happen, I just think I'm not going to go ahead and call one tomorrow without discussion amongst the board first. So if it does happen, we all discuss it as a board prior to scheduling that.
Information gathering, yeah.
So this is a good discussion. Why don't we, when we talk in 2 weeks about the interlocal agreement, start to think about, as you're discussing that, think about a town hall meeting or two, and then we'll see how that goes. And
we can do it once. We don't have to commit to it yet. We can do it once with town hall with the interlocal and see how.
Okay, just a couple last
that
things. I know we're not going to be able to finish those other minor items. I'll just call your attention to the last item on the agenda, topics for May survey. All that means is if we're going to build a survey and JR is going to put it out in May, if we're going to continue the survey process and JR is going to put it out in May, we need to be thinking about topics, because topics becomes questions and questions becomes formatting. One of my suggestions is that we start some active discussion about website, and that would go parallel with, I know what Patrick is already doing it, and there's a lot of doing some work on website. And I would propose website as a workshop agenda item 2 weeks from now, but also as a survey item for May. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So the question now is, what other topics might you want on a survey? Historically, we've only had 2 or 3. We have some sitting, waiting about covenants. So as a potential topic, so think about other topics. We just need to finalize it at the next next workshop.
How about CROA sponsoring downtown events?
Okay, so
Lexington doing anything?
Yeah.
Focus more for residents, using Lakeside and at least getting the residents downtown again.
Events as a whole.
So be thinking
It ties
about
back,
that.
yeah, we have to keep that in mind. Maybe specifically, maybe now snowing, since we're 6 months out by May results.
So be thinking about.
Maybe not a month, but though.
6 months, yeah.
The last thing is, before we look at upcoming scheduling, I'll pass that around, is looking ahead. We did author an article in the Celebration News that comes out this weekend, JR?
Some may get it Saturday.
Okay, so we do have an article. We'll see how that plays for you all. Are you interested in having a presence in each edition?
Yes.
Yes.
Just a sense, okay? So start thinking about what you would like to have mentioned. The first one was kind of a feel-good. The second one would be, here's what your board has already accomplished. And these are due by the 10th of the month. So we'd be writing something by April 10th, if I have the date correct, for May 1st. And May 10th for June 1st, et cetera. We're okay with that? So here's what, just the last thing is proposed, I hope I got the days right. Drive around agenda is 2 weeks from today, 1 to 5. I just wrote what I saw as the goals for the board, get acquainted with our assets, review the plans, and this has to do, I think Todd is one of the leads, has to do with what's on the track for reserve projects, and then just get acquainted with what's around our community in a more formal sense. Steve had said he was going to rent a van.
We've already rented that van.
6 passengers. We have lats.
12.
Oh, 12, good. So taking a look at how is Yellowstone doing, and just taking a look at our community. Board workshop agenda, we talked about downtown and CROA's, please.
Well, I think you're going to have to add now the report that you want us to do.
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, I printed this before. I don't have that. Well, then website overhaul, what that might look like. Contents, function, style transition, newspaper. Take a look at that, and upcoming events. I think, Kevin, that was, I think, from you. Parliamentarian has been, we talked about that as strategic planning, and then review of dumpster information. I know that's exciting.
What was the date on that he needed that?
I have no idea because Floyd sprung this on me. This was something that I did 3 years ago.
And Steve sent it, and I
No,
think
I sent it to Steve.
Oh, you sent it to Steve?
Just see how it could, I'll give you
I
the
think they want
basis
our
of
input.
it.
I think they want our input. I don't,
Yeah, I can give you the basis of, we'll wait for another meeting for that.
is this all looking okay? And then I just wanted to start building the board agenda for a month from now. And I wanted to talk about timelines on that. My philosophy is if we, and tell me if you disagree, once we publish the agenda, that's it.
That's it.
So things don't come in on Friday or Saturday or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. They're in the published agenda. And unless it's an emergency, otherwise it just has to wait.
Agreed.
That's, if you want to view it differently, let's talk about it. But that's, in the board book, you know, we're done. I mean, once it's there and it's put online for the residents, it's our board book.
Perfect.
But I've just,
One thing I
go ahead.
didn't see on here, even when you talk about the future, that concerns me is Island Village. I mean,
Okay.
how are we gonna get updates on Island Village so that we just don't have something sprung on us again, like, gee, this is what we've decided and too bad.
I think that would be through Kevin and
With
Jackson through CJC.
CJC, which will hopefully we can push a CJC sooner than May 15th.
I will put that on there so we don't lose track of that.
I-
The intent of this is to help keep me honest and keep all of us on track.
I think
so
a
we
lot of
don't
people
lose-
I think a lot of people will be very curious, even if it's brief.
Good.
Susan, in respect to CJC, are you able to send maybe an introduction email to Jackson and myself with the rest of the CJC board? So that way we can at least begin that conversation. I'm assuming in order to make that motion with them in writing, it would be by email to the entire board. Perfect.
Anything else for the good of the order? You've been doing great on time, thank you. Thank you for having focused discussions. Anything else from the audience?
I just have one question. When you send your RFPs out for the building on the athletic field, is it their responsibility, the contractors that are then submitting, their proposals, is it their responsibility to check with the county as to how many restrooms are actually required for athletic fields? For the number of bathrooms for each child?
Can you have Steve check on that?
architect.
Because he's already designed it and should be in compliance with.
Yeah, that's just a question I had.
That's a good
because,
question. That's a good question. So to make sure that they are in compliance with,
whatever the county requires for, like, we have swimming pools, we have bathrooms, but those aren't, like county things where they're,
county, state, also ADA.
yeah.
I have a couple of items in my mind. One of those is actually, if you want to note it, is a grease trap. If we do have a concession stand and we have any food, a grease trap. Hardest thing is Osceola County with Toho, and that's $25,000. So that could drive our costs up a lot.
Right,
So I want to.
Those are actually pose a danger, so I'm sure that there's guidelines on how those are.
Toho is really hard. This is the hardest county when it comes to any food concessions, and
Part of that is probably St. John's water management. They're much harder in this area than they are in, say, like North Florida.
Anyone else have anything before we close? Thank you all for your participation. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.